I get asked a lot about art licensing agents, and I talk to many new designers who are looking to get signed with an art licensing agent. As someone who was represented by an agent for over 10 years and has a lot of industry contacts who also have had agents or do have agents, there's something really important that I'm always trying to convey to artists looking to sign. No two art licensing agencies are the same. Today, I'm chatting with three designers, successful artists who are represented by different agents, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that they have differences amongst the agencies so that you can get a better handle about what it's like working with an art licensing agent. By the way, if the concept of art licensing and art licensing agents is brand new to you, be sure to check out my recent video, Art Licensing Agencies, Are They Right for You? I go into the definitions of what exactly these things mean if this is a brand new concept for you. I am so excited today because I am joined by three very talented artists, all of which are represented by different art licensing agencies. So today we are going to talk about art licensing agencies and the differences between them. So today I have with us Nadia Hassan, Michael Zindel, and Nicole Tamrin. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
No problem.
So can we go around and briefly, can you guys introduce yourself? Let us know how long you've been with your current agency and if you've ever been represented by other agencies, kind of your little agency backstory. Nadia, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Yeah. So, hi, I'm Nadia Hassan. I am currently represented by Wayne's World, and I've been with Wayne's World since September of last year, and loved my experience so far. I also had another agency from 2014 to 2020. I was with Pink Light, so I've had two experiences, and both very different, but both, positive in different ways.
Awesome. Nicole?
So I'm Nicole Tamron, and I have been with my agency, which is Courtney Davis, and they have been an agency for 50 plus years. Like they're close to 50 years. I have been with them for, it's really hard for me to say it, but 9, because I was actually on my own for a good chunk of time prior. And I think that was like 5, 6 years of on my own representation. Did all the trade shows, worked with clients individually, and yeah, it's been a huge shift for me, obviously, when I've stayed in, but there's definitely pros to not having an agent, and then there's pros to having an agent. So I have both of those sides, I guess, that I kind of am always batting back and forth. But yeah, it's been nine years this spring, which is just feels like a lifetime.
Time flies, right? That's
Yeah.
awesome. How about you, Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Zindel. I've been with Cruise Creative since 2022. And I would consider that my first real agent. Before that, I had sort of a more casual relationship with what I would consider more of a studio, where it was definitely more only outright sales of basically portfolio surface pattern design. So you would just make repeats and they would sell them for a flat fee that was negotiated up front. This is more, I guess similar to all of you, where it's any and all types of art, from spot patterns to hero patterns to illustrations. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, I both were so different that I don't think they actually relate at all. But that's my experience so far with sort of not the part of it that's not being on my own.
Awesome. And for people who are new to me, I am Elizabeth Silver, and I am currently unrepresented. I don't have an agent, but when I started my licensing journey in 2013, I signed on with Jewel Branding and Licensing, and I was with them for over 10 years. I split with the agency last summer, fall. So I'm just dipping into the unrepresented life, but for over a decade, I have experience with an agent. So I'll be kind of talking about that experience and, comparing it to what everyone else is bringing to the table. So I'm so glad to get to compare and contrast, because as we all know from talking to each other and other artists, it is wild how different all these agencies are. I think people try to do their research up front as best they can when they're getting into working with agents, because obviously it is a partnership. You want to find that right fit. But people would be surprised how differently each agency operates. So I was thinking today, first we could talk a little bit about agency sort of protocols and processes, and we'll just sort of go around. I have a couple, questions, obviously, but we can kind of go around and talk about our experiences in this arena. My first question or thing that happens with agents is, I'm wondering, do your agencies have a lot of support staff or multiple agents that are pitching? Or is it just, like one main agent who, maybe has an admin or something like that? And then the other part of the question, so basically how big as far as the agent side is it? And then the other part is how many artists approximately does your agency represent? So, what's sort of the ratio of agents to artists? Nicole, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start. So we are what's considered a boutique agency, so it's relatively small. There are 3 agents within that system, and then of course there's support staff for like office kind of stuff with very, very little, and not to my benefit of, I guess in theory they could do the templating or some, but I don't benefit from that. So I can't really claim, but that is there. So it's office and organization and art files and all that sending situation. And then there's the more boring billing and contracts
stuff
and
like
that kind of
that,
thing.
yeah.
So as far as the art side, there are 3 different agents. The way that we work is that each agent handles a different client base. That's somewhat divided by category, but we have some overlap between agents. Just as our relationship with our agents is a relationship, so is theirs with their clients. And so each agent has, caters to a certain grouping of clients' needs. But yeah, so we're pretty small. I would say that total it's kind of fluctuates. I would say maybe 12 to 14. So that's kind of small if you
Artists.
consider that. But out of those 14, I would tell you there's probably less than 10 of us that are actively working, because our agency also does manage a few portfolios for people who are not actively creating. And so, that's kind of cool that you can take art that you're not making for licensing and have someone still putting it out.
Marketing it.
But they're very specific looks, but I would be considered one of the people who is like an active licensing artist. So I'm responding in real time to things that are happening where, so that's almost half, or,
Yeah.
2/3 of the agency that is, so it's, I would say pretty small, under 10.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. How about you, Michael?
I was just Googling real quick how many artists are on there, because I don't know. It's more than I had expected when I signed on. It's probably around 50.
Mhm.
And I've had conversations, I would not call my relationship with my agent super in depth. It's active, but I don't get a lot of behind the scenes like information from them. But I did have recent conversation where I asked about some of the artists, and it's similar to what Nicole just said. I was, again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I was led to believe that there is a fair amount of artists that are considered sort of archival, where they very rarely will make new art, but they definitely will not edit art. So if they do add art, it's of their own discretion, but they won't actively, like, say if a manufacturer says, "Oh, I like this chicken, but can you make it in like 5 other versions?" They will just not do it. It's just what they put in, and if it works, it works. I also think a fair amount of them are older and were in licensing in the 80s and 90s and just found a place to sort of land and kind of continue selling older art to people looking for traditional, like the Norman Rockwell-y type, stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, and then no, you answered it. And so relatively big, and then how many sort of agents are at your agency, or like staff, would you say approximately?
Right. So unfortunately, the owner of the company recently died.
Oh, no.
She was Suzanne Cruz had created and owned this business for a very long time. I'm not even quite sure, but she goes back a long time. And there was staff that supported her. So we have like a VP that pretty much handles everything. An art director who kind of acts like an agent in that she will be more hands-on with customers and try to fish out of them like, okay, well, here's some things, what would you like us to do, or would you like to see something else, or let me show, like she'll edit out the presentations to make sure that they're in line with what's being looked for. And then there's like art support, like online portfolio managers and art uploaders and people like that. But I would think the staff is probably very small, like maybe 4 or 5 people. I don't think it's very large at all. And I would assume that it's really like 1 to 1.5 people acting as like an actual hands-on agent. We all don't have our own, it's not like there's a staff of 6 and we're each assigned a person. It's all the people working, together. So I've always dealt with the same exact people on every issue. It's definitely not like a divvied up, assignment. Like because I've spoken to you in the past, like sort of the way Jewel had worked with you guys. It's definitely not like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to kind of, piggyback off that, that's sort of, so for Jewel they also have they have probably around 40 or 50 artists, but they also have some properties, sort of like this archival, like New York Botanical Gardens,
Right.
and certain like brands that just have art that they then kind of work with. And they have probably 5-ish agents, and then at least 4 or 5 different like support staff. And it used to be that it was relatively divided up, and they always said like, every agent is selling everyone's work. Like if someone comes to a different agent and says, do you have any birthday cards? It's not like my birthday cards are not going to be shown.
Right.
But my sort of contact person was a specific person. I think they've restructured a little bit towards the end of when I was working with them. They had sort of a certain licensing department because they also do other creative services. So it seems like they're always kind of moving things around, but they do have, a number of different sort of agents in the agency. How about you, Nadia?
So at Wayne's World, there's only one agent, and that is Liz Wayne herself, but she has three members of support staff. I think they're all part-time or part-time-ish, like for handling, like sending the files to the clients and pitching and just putting together the decks of images that get shown, and just like admin stuff too. So, and like sending samples and all the many, many things that go into running an agency. And I believe there are 30-ish, maybe a little over 30 artists with Wayne's World. I think most of them are active, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I think, for the most part, there's that many people on the emails, that go out each week. So I'm guessing for the most part, people are pretty active.
Yeah. So, looking at those kind of numbers, I think that brings us to the next thing. And this is such a big cultural, like agency culture difference that I've heard. And that is sort of, how often do you meet with your agents? What type of info do you cover? Because for me, it was usually like I had to request a meeting. At most, it was like once a year. I mean, if I wanted to request a meeting every quarter or something like that, I could. But it was very sort of high level of like, this is what we have coming up with the agency. This is what we're pitching here. We just went to the licensing expo or Atlanta, and, these 3 companies specifically were really looking at your art. But we're waiting. It was always like, we're waiting, we're going to see. It was all kind of high level. And when I asked for feedback of like, what could I be doing to sort of,
do better? Basically, how could I improve my portfolio and make better connections? You know, I mean, it always felt a little bit like guesswork, which is, I mean, it is always guesswork, right? There's no one knows the answer exactly. So it's not, this is no slight towards Jules agents, but it was sort of like, well, maybe, you know, people seem to like your juvenile stuff. You could do more juvenile stuff, or people seem to like this, you could do more this. And so that was kind of, it was pretty sort of like high level overview, but I'm curious how often you meet with your agents and the kind of feedback that you're getting. Nicole, how's it with
I can
Courtney?
start. I was like, email what? Group email? No. So
You don't get group emails. There we go.
Yeah,
So there we
don't
go.
get group emails. I mean, we do very, very rarely, like when COVID was happening, or we just got one about like the tariffs. Like, but yeah, again, we're more of like this boutique, so we're all really individual. I love the other artists at my agency, and I like that group culture of stuff. So I would love there to be more of that, but there just isn't, and there's not gonna be. So I just like, you just let it lie. But I would say that as far as when you were talking about like an overview of your business, I almost feel like I was trying to think if we've done that probably like once or twice, like where the agents kind of look at my business collectively. Once was very early on, probably about the 3-year mark, to be like how things are going. But I see my agents in person every year when we do Atlanta. One of my agents actually lives in Massachusetts, so sometimes like she and I will get together. I've met with clients with her, like, you know, just like that kind of thing. But as far as contact, that it just varies depending on what's in the fire. Like, I haven't had a lot of contact since January in terms of sit downs. But that's also because I already have like the marching orders, like I'm full plate, whatever. So, I mean, it could be several times a day, or it could be, you know, a week or two in between. But I usually am talking to somebody through an email or text messages or phone calls weekly. But that's just because there's
That's
things
because it's specific assignments
specific project.
or
Yeah, it's
call
really
out.
specific projects. And
Gotcha.
I definitely will talk to one of my, like, I have an agent that I do a lot of work with her clients, and so, you know, she and I will definitely spend more time like with the 4-hour phone call versus like the text message or the request or the email. So it just depends on my involvement in the full project and with them. But yeah, they're very hands-on. And I will say this about them is if there's something that's needed, you can get someone on the phone immediately. So it's not like there's a lack of it, but there's nothing planned. There's nothing scheduled. There's nothing like, there's no system in place.
Yeah.
So it's more like hey, I need this from you, or I need.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that's so different for you, Nadia. Can you talk about your experiences?
Sure. And so my 2 agency experiences have been kind of night and day with this regard. So at Wayne's World, I meet with Liz like once a week. And especially since, you know, I'm still pretty new to the agency, so that may taper off to like every other week, you know, like as we move forward. But we do meet once a week over Zoom, and we discuss like what I'm working on. And she gives a lot of feedback on the work, you know, to help improve and just make things, you know, more, you know, commercially viable. And just, you know, with all of her experience with trends and with product, like she's very product focused. And so she's always like, well, what product do you see this on? And which is new for me because I've always just been very like, let me just make stuff and then we'll see what happens. And she's the opposite. So that's been a learning and a growing experience, but it's also been really helpful. When I was with Pinklight, we met once a year and didn't have very much contact, you know, like in the interim. As towards the end of my time with Pinklight, they were starting to do like monthly team meetings, you know, to kind of go over trends and stuff like that. But like I meet with Liz every week, and we get like the whole team gets like emails about like call outs and updates like pretty frequently throughout the week. So there's a lot of communication, which I like. I feel a lot more connected, you know, in this experience versus the first one. But you know, everyone's different, and not everybody might want, you know, that level of communication. So
yeah, definitely. How about you, Michael?
I think it's more similar to Nicole in that I don't feel neglected, but there certainly is not regular communication. There certainly isn't weekly calls. We had a group-wide, you know, artist Zoom call. I think it was in December or January. So like everybody in the agency was, on the call, and that was more about, the changes in the agency with, the new management and everything, but also just to talk about things that were going on. I feel like I'm in regular contact with them though, because, as contracts come out or art calls or, things happen, the emails are pretty regular. It's not, I would say it's rare that like 2 weeks go by without some type of, update or something from them. But there's certainly, unlike Nadia, there certainly is no, even though we have quote unquote an art director, every piece of art is not reviewed and sort of, tweaked and where's this going and who's this for and blah, blah. It's sort of more at your discretion. And obviously, like, I get the feeling that this is going to sound strange, but I don't know that if I'm a lucky one or if other people find, I've heard from other artists that they will tend to get some negative reviews, or like maybe this isn't the best art for this, this call or blah, blah. I've not personally had that. I do get, I will get on the phone with, let's say like a factory or a manufacturer is looking for very specific Christmas art. I might talk with the art director and she'll say like, oh, I'm thinking of sending these 10 things, but if you have time, could you maybe do like X, Y, and Z in addition? And that's up to me if I would like to add more or not. Like say specifically, like if they're doing a circus theme, like if I don't have enough circus art and they're like, hey, it'd be really great if you could do an elephant, like that's up to me if I want to do it or not, but it's certainly not forced. And there definitely is not, any in-depth like digging, like I said, like at the art for like, oh, this wouldn't work for a notebook, but why don't you change it? Like there's nothing like that. It's sort of like what you put in is like left up to its own lifetime.
Yeah.
Like if it has legs, it has legs, and if it doesn't, you'll know because it doesn't go anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I think that was definitely my experience as well. Though we did have they tried to do like a quarterly newsletter to everyone, and sometimes or for a while it was like a quarterly like webinar, like something that was like talking about trends, and sometimes they would have like a copyright lawyer or some other like kind of information for getting, a lot of the artists on calls. But certainly, yeah, when you were talking about the group feel, Nicole, and how you wish they had that, it's like, it was definitely up to me to be like, hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm also at your agency. You might not know that, but, and me, I'll just be like, I show up in inboxes whether they want me there or not. So I will introduce myself, but yeah, it wasn't exactly like a, hey, we're all on team Jewel, so.
I don't think there's a team aspect to being at an agency either, though. I mean, you're still in competition with each other. So
Yeah,
there's a
that's
healthy
true.
level of, we can support. I mean, it's the same way you would support your artist friends in general. But yeah, there's no team of the agencies,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of funny. But that's, I mean, you all are in this industry, which is a fairly like supportive, welcoming community in general. So it's just like that. I think the one thing that's a little different about the team or like the group of someone at your agency versus someone that's at a different agency is there is the ability to talk about client specific, situations, which I definitely is something that I won't discuss with people from a different agency. It's more, and that's not like it's insider information, but it kind of is. It's like we do have an approach, and every agency does work with different clients, which is something I've also noticed. So you'll see that the art will shift from agency to agency. I was gonna say about the like I don't call it micromanagement, but it's kind of that as far as like art direction. Like I love like Liz thinking about product, but like I was gonna say I don't have anything that leaves here before it's been heavily gone through the like I wouldn't say it's an approval process. It's more of a like I have my parts and pieces, and then I have one particular agent that I really art directs well and I respond to. So we will like really develop strong collections before they're launching out. So I'm not just uploading art.
Oh, okay.
Because that's
So she's giving you feedback via calls and emails of saying like, I love this, but this should be a little bit more whatever,
Yeah,
different.
I think it's
whatever.
more, I mean, and it took me a long time over those 9 years to do that situation with them, but specifically I found with my one agent, I have a very good back and forth. So we do, like, she comes up with ideas sometimes, I come up with ideas sometimes, and we just sort of collaborate, and it's much more like working with an art director,
Mm.
pulling colors. But you have to understand too, your agent is the other part of the conversation. So sometimes we're making art in a vacuum, but oftentimes their agents are the ones having the conversations with the manufacturers. So they're kind of relaying the needs, and oftentimes the manufacturers aren't very good at knowing what they're looking
Yeah.
for. So they're trying to pull that information. So it's like when, yes, it's a team thing, like they do business and you do art, but it's also a team thing in terms of communication. And so drawing out of clients what their needs are and going through from the art side and getting something to where you get a yes and everyone can move kind of forward, I think is an important part of it's like a dance that you have to do with, like,
Yeah.
not there for it, but there. So it's weird because you're having, all of those sides are actually part of the conversation, and your agent is kind of the quote, it, like, the go-between. It's like a,
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. Like you kind of, I kind of, I feel like art licensing is just so different than other industries. But then when you like, I don't know, watch movies or see or listen to podcasts about like actors' agents, right? And like whatever, it's like the type of things of like people who are like actively arguing on your behalf and that kind of
Right.
stuff. And it's like, it's like, yeah, that's what kind of what it's supposed to be. But at the same time, it's just different. It's interesting. Well, Nicole, you brought up something interesting that I wanted to ask you guys about, which is, would you say that your agencies has a more specific clientele? Meaning, does it lean towards certain products or certain styles of art? Michael, I know that you specifically had said, like, you have a lot of sort of legacy artists, maybe,
Right.
who are more for that traditional client. What would you say about sort of either the type of products that your agency works with more, or even styles of art or anything like
Right. Well, okay. So caveat being, because I don't want to offend anybody, is like, this is just my opinion looking at, I don't know every artist on the roster, but
Of
the
course.
art I do see, and the clients that they have, tends to be, in my opinion, a little bit more traditional. They have what is more like a set group of, like they have their Rolodex of people that they have contacts with. So like there's their fabric people, their flag people, there's certain categories they just aren't in. So like we don't do a lot of certain things, and we do a lot of repetitive stuff on other things. But I have noticed, as I've done my own investigation and looked at some of the artists, that like a lot of the artists seem to be, more artist first, product second, design not at all.
Yeah.
And I
So
am
like
not.
fine art, almost like fine artists. Yeah.
Yes, like almost like you'd expect their art to be on like fake canvas, prints behind glass, and they just happen to also get them on other things.
Mhm.
But at first they probably think more in terms of like a canvas with a pretty image than say a collection, or what would apply to a plate versus a flag versus fabric. I don't.
Right.
Again, I don't know for sure. That's just sort of my like 20 feet out, like looking at their portfolios. And it definitely at times, you know me, I'm not that type of person, so
Very
I think in
design
advance,
focused,
and
yeah.
I try to plan everything out of like, okay, if I'm going, what would be, like the ensemble of everything that goes together. And I continue to work that way, and it's been okay, for me, but it definitely, is not the way most of the other artists seem to work. Like there's a handful that do. I would also say that, like, I look at, I mean, we can use Wayne's World as an example. Like there's definitely artists on there that seem, of the moment, and like their palettes and their motifs and everything that they do is very youth oriented.
Forward.
Yeah, or you could look at it and say like, oh, that looks like it would sell at here, or that looks like it would sell at there. And a lot of the art that, is at my agency is definitely more, middle ground. It's not necessarily super, super realistic transitional, but it's definitely not like the most current, up to date, trend forward stuff. And I think that's really less to do with the artist and more about like the manufacturers and what they're continually coming back for. So like you set up a legacy of, if we're known for realistic Santas, like all of a sudden, if someone starts doing fun penguins, like they're the oddball, whatever.
Yeah.
You guys get it. So I do think that, if I were to say from my experience, it definitely seems to be a more traditional, older, more seasoned type of artist that's on the roster, and not very youthful, not super young, not super edgy. It's you will see pieces, come and go, but it definitely seems to be, yeah, like very yeah. And again, the agency is based in Kansas, right near Hallmark. So a lot of the artists are ex-Hallmark people. So you can kind of put together why, what DNA led to it being the way it is. I don't think it was necessarily a conscious choice or, that they seek out certain people. I think it's just, what people ask for is what we want to provide. And then the legacy of like where these people all sort of came from, contributed to that. So I definitely sought out other artists on my team that I feel aligned with, or that like have similar, like, you and I are friends, and I have other artists in the community that are friends. I do the same with artists on my own roster, just so that I could have like, better conversations about like current thinking and what do you think about this, or bounce ideas off. So that kind of relates to your last question too, is like sometimes instead of relying on necessarily what the agency says, I'll talk to peers and see like, well, what do you think about this for a journal, or what do you think about this for a card, or would you add anything, or take, is it too busy? Just the simple, stuff we all need community for. I'll just find it, where I can find it,
Yeah,
I will say this too, just because that's kind of what Michael's saying is your art licensing agents are not necessarily art directors or teachers or are here to train you how to do the business or designers. And so that's kind of sometimes when you're looking for an agent, you'll be like, well, I just need someone to help and be in my corner. And like, you have to look at them as just salespeople. And sometimes, like, Liz is really great with product, but Liz also worked in product for a million years. So, like, Liz understands product. And, my agency also has been in art direct, like, my one agent that I do a lot of art direction with was an art director at some point, and some, like, also owned parts of product in other ways. But they're all very, very different from that aspect, too. But I will say that I haven't heard a single agent that's able to train you up. Like there's not training you up once you get an art agent. They are not for that, and they don't have time. And but I do think that there is something to be said for, learning on your own, or even as we talk, we all need peer input, because you're not going to get that from
an agent,
your agency. And I'm the same way. I will go and I'll have friends help me kind of pull something together to where I feel comfortable having it art directed, because same idea, Wayne's World is very trend forward and our agency is not. And it doesn't mean that they don't notice the trends, but they are not comfortable implementing them in the volume of pricing. So we will tend to be several seasons behind, or sometimes even at 6 months. Like I'll have something, I remember doing a floral with mushrooms. It was literally called like Mushroom Botanical, and then launched at a show, and every one of our clients asked me to take the mushrooms out. And you're like, well, that was the point. And then literally by the summer, they were like, do you have anything with mushrooms? I was like, I did, but you've used it, and it now no longer has mushrooms in it. So, it's just kind of that, as well as the idea that, some of the art that is shown, each of the agencies has a sort of look to them, but it's more a customer base. And so that's why I said we all work with different people based off of that customer base. And, having the design experience and like understanding how to think in collections and product and all that stuff is absolutely like necessary right now. So I just want to kind of clarify that in case you think you can be a legacy artist that's able to put out art that would be on a painting and do well in licensing currently, those are different conversations. I think Michael and I would both say that the people at our agency who are of that time period and caliber are also the people who are not working actively in terms of these calls and like the new active needs of licensing. That is not
Right.
what that is. So this is not a conversation of, oh, Cruise Creative is for the people who just want to make wall art, because that would be not how that works.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed Julie Newman, who started Jewel Branding a few years ago, and what she told me was that she started her agency. She had started it maybe 3 or 4 years before I signed on, which would put it at around 2010 or so. So maybe it's a 15-year old licensing agency. And at that time, what she was seeing is what Michael and Nicole are talking about, is like everyone was this sort of fine art, traditional artwork. And she was like, I wasn't relating to that as someone who was in, did licensing. It's like, those aren't the type of products that I would be wanting to buy. And so I set out to start an agency that was trend forward, that we
Right.
had this kind of commercial like art style, which is why, not that there aren't beautiful people who can paint wonderfully, like analog paintings at Jewel, but it is very design focused. It is very trend forward. A lot of the artists are like digital artists, like I am. And so, it is specifically meant to be, was built to be in contrast to some of the older art licensing styles.
and that's
And
also too, it's the way the industry has developed, right?
Right.
Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not just that, like when we were talking about like way back, we're going to mail a painting to a company and they're going to scan it and do stuff. That's not how product is done any longer. So that's what I was saying. There's like kind of the image that would be wall art, or I'm going to give you an image, because at our agency we also have artists that aren't as computer
tech
savvy,
savvy,
and they
yeah,
have
of
somebody
course.
that they've hired to do that. Or and I just don't think that's like Julie, who I always think is sort of like on the cusp of like what's happening and seeing forward. I mean, that's just, if you worked in product, you will see that that's not how product is done. So what's really innovative about that is that over the timeline, all these companies are starting to eliminate their basically their design teams, so that task still has to go somewhere, and it's been unfortunately absorbed by the artists.
Mhm.
I don't know better because I came into that world, so that's how actually I learned how to create art, was with those ideas in mind. But yeah, I just think we're seeing a lot of shifting within the way that manufacturers use art too, that's happened. And so the agency model, especially some of the older agencies, have this line they're walking with customer needs. Because again, what are they? They're the liaison. So their customer needs are coming and they're trying to solve those problems, and they have these people to do it with. And we're all needing to kind of do more of that multitasking. So coming into this world now, I think looks a little different, looks very different than it did if you
Yeah,
were in it for a while. So
yeah, I agree. What about you, Nadia? Would you say that Liz Wayne, I mean, I know Nicole touched on it a little bit of being a little more sort of trend forward, but is there certain products, or what do you see as sort of where your agency kind of falls in the clientele spectrum?
Sure. I think it seems like every agency has like a core group of clients that are kind of their bread and butter that they work with the most and they get the most attention. And so, of course, that does, I think, inform what the agency, the look and feel is overall, because if the bulk of your work is going to a select few clients, it is going to, give it kind of a certain look and feel. And
Yeah,
that's true for Wayne's World. That was true for Pinklight as well. Both agencies are trend forward and contemporary. And even within that, like at Wayne's World in particular, I am on the more contemporary end. So like even more sort of like, which can be tricky and difficult because that's a risk, for companies to take art that's too trend forward, that's too like it's not tried and true. So it may not sell. It might be can get harder to place art that is very of the moment. And even within Wayne's World, there's a few of us who are like primarily digital artists, but I would say the bulk of the artists represented are actually they work in traditional media like watercolor and acrylic, and they do their work in an analog way, and then they scan it and manipulate it, and there is a digital component. But actually, even though the look and feel and the themes are very trend forward and contemporary, not all of us are digital artists, only a handful. And I will say Liz does a great job of protecting each artist's kind of like look and making sure that within her agency that there isn't too much overlap, and that, you know, those of us who have a more digital look are sort of staying distinct and not, you know, kind of becoming one sort of
Uh,
digital blob of art, which, you know, that was not the case as much at my previous agency where, you know, it wasn't as much of a consideration. And I do really appreciate that Liz makes sure that we all kind of have our own lane, even if, you know, there are some similar styles in the mix. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, let's dive into the economic side of things because I know people are very curious about that. Let's talk about commission splits and if you had any other fees or costs working with your agency. So I'll start off that when I first signed with Jewel, I had pitched to a few other agencies and I had a couple, at least one other agent that was interested in signing me. And when I talked to Jewel, they had their commission split, which was 60-40 for me. I think that's since changed to 50-50, but I was, you know, they got 40% and I got 60%, but they also had an upfront marketing fee, which was an annual fee that was based on, you know, them going to shows and travel and any sort of advertisement that they might do. And I mean, it changed over the years, but, you know, I think at the time, maybe it was like 1,500, maybe it was 1,000. It went up at some point to like 2,000. It stopped during COVID, you know, it was kind of all over the place, but I almost didn't sign with Jewel because I was like, I've heard that licensing is a gamble and it's going to take a while for me to make money. And so if I sign with Jewel, I immediately like pretty much have to start
in the whole
giving into this. I have to start giving them money basically. And so I almost signed with the other agency. But in the end, honestly, the lawyer that I used to look over my contracts was like basically nudged me towards Jewel and thought it was a better agency, and who knows. But so that marketing fee was an additional thing that got taken out of my royalties each. I mean, for a while, obviously I didn't have royalties. It takes some time to get started, but that got taken out each time. And, you know, it was relatively significant when your royalties, you're already getting 40% taken out. And then this flat fee of whether it was 1,000 or 1,500, or like I said, at one point, I feel like it was 2,000. It's like, even if that's 250 or, you know, 300 or 500 each quarter, because I got paid quarterly, that was a significant chunk, you know? And so that was something that, you know, is normal. Like there are other agencies that do that, but it was a bummer for my bottom line. So I'm curious, Michael, why don't you address that? What was your commission split? Do you have any other fees?
it's a 50-50 split, which seems, you know, I applied to a bunch of places basically, and that seemed to be pretty consistent with what seems to be the norm now. And we have no other fees. There's nothing added on for prints or for shows, but, you know, to be fair, we don't do very many shows. I think that's might be starting to change, because I've been hearing, you know, obviously, for those of you who know me, this isn't my full-time gig. I'm a full-time art director and product developer. So, you know, the industry seems to be buzzing a little bit more about some of these newer shows where, like, you think back to like a year or two ago, like Surtex was a dirty word and like nobody wanted to, you know, the quality was going down. It was like a scam. People were like, you know, new artists weren't basically up to snuff enough, and you were seeing lots of like mediocre art. Now it seems like that shifted, so I don't know if we were maybe in like a lull where that just wasn't economically viable to do those things. But you know, 3 years ago when I signed on, I did ask about that because I knew of your experiences and I knew of basically a bunch of other people saying similar things. So there is nothing else tacked on. It's just a straight up, you know, 50-50 of everything. But I do think, you know, maybe you want to work into this, like, I did make a lot of concessions before I signed about like clients that would remain mine, and projects that were not on the table. You could not have a portion of this, maybe in the future date, if I decided this became out of control for me, I'd hand them over to the agent to deal with. But for now, I was fine dealing like one-on-one. And those were some of the considerations that pushed me to sign, because there was a lot of understanding that like they did not own you. You were your own person, and your business was your business, and your clients were your clients, and they only wanted to be paid for what they had an active role in doing. And I think that's something that, newer artists should think about, because I was thinking about this earlier when Nadia was talking, is that there are some agents I feel definitely push the artist name as the commodity, and the artist look as the commodity. And then there are agents where the art, no matter who did it, is the commodity. And this sort of relates to what Nicole was saying, which is an art agent is not necessarily your friend. They are not necessarily your art director. They're not here to make you a better artist or a stronger artist. If you present, let's say, major stores looking for a turkey for Thanksgiving, and you spent 3 days, illustrating the best turkey you could, if that person doesn't like it, they're going to flip through a book and find another turkey to put in front of them. They're not going to think like, oh, but I owe it to this designer because they are like my friend. It's all about what's going to bring in the money to the agency. So, I think there's other aspects than just the split to consider. And I would just urge younger designers, or like people who don't have agents, to just consider before you sign, like, aside from the payment, like what other things are important to you. And if you're really looking to be your own, like we know plenty of artists who consider themselves like the brand, right? Like not every place is looking for that. They just want you to do. And I bet I not to deflect this onto Nadia, but I would assume like her Pinklight experience versus her Wayne's World experience, even though she said they were very different, like I see Pinklight, even though I don't know them, as Pinklight is the brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could not name a single artist that worked at Pinklight, even though I know many of them, because they're basically like the staff of Pinklight. And yet Wayne's World, like I know plenty of people that, I look at their art or I see the mailers or whatever, and you can contrast that with even other, even more boutique agencies like Brenda Manley or, others like her, where it's more about the person than it is about necessarily even the art. Like they're selling a vision. And so I think people should look at that too. Like, who are you? What are you trying to be? And be realistic about it. Like, are you a superstar that's going to be your own brand, or are you just happy making, and experiencing your art and getting it out in the world, however that is, and receiving payment for it? They're two very different ways of dealing with it, and I think it's really based on the person.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, and there really is a difference. I think you're right, and you make some good points about what you can kind of keep before talking about negotiating your contract and things like that, and sort of the house accounts, and we can dive into a little bit of that if we have some time. Nadia, what are your thoughts on that and your commission split and
Sure.
Fees?
So in both of my experiences, I had a 50-50 commission split. It does seem like that's, once one agency starts doing that, every agency has permission to also make that their split. So that does seem like that's been the standard. With Pinklight, I did not have any additional fees except for I had to pay to print and ship my own art to like trade shows when that was a thing. I'm not even sure if that happens anymore. If like people are printing physical prints.
Right.
With Wayne's World, everything is digital. It's on iPads and is shown digitally at shows when she goes. So with Wayne's World, I did have an onboarding fee. It was $1,500, and that asked, let's say what's covered by this fee, and a lot of it was just it takes a lot of work to get an artist up and running, to get them on your website, to get them established, and there's a lot of time involved in that. And so I think that's it's fair if that is a fee that your agent has. It is something that I think it's so perfectly okay to like ask, hey, like what's this for? But also, yeah, it is a lot of work to onboard an artist. Other than that, we don't really have any additional fees except for there was a small fee for licensing expo because those shows can just be incredibly expensive. So we were asked to contribute $500 for expo. And I felt like that was fair just because the expense is pretty extraordinary. So, but yeah, otherwise, like it's, the commission split, should and does cover like sort of most of the expenses. Because it's a pretty big expense, to have half.
Yeah.
half of
Yeah.
your
Oh,
earnings.
yeah.
50/50
So,
is standard. I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot of working models now, but those are new.
Sure.
That's the
Yeah.
old 50/50
Yeah.
has always been the
Sure.
standard. I think that, and that's really where it's coming down to the other ways of working, if they would be more of a fit for you as an artist, because of course a lot of people do other things while doing this, and so 50/50 depending on what you want to do and how much you're going to give and all that, but really it's a commitment on both parts, and you should take it as seriously as choosing a person to be married to, so because you're going to split all of your income with that person regardless of how you feel about it. So it's like yeah, it's a big decision when you do those kind of things. We're obviously a 50/50 split as well, and we don't have any, I mean, with 50/50 you shouldn't have other fees, is my thought, honestly, because 50/50 is every single dollar, 50 cents of every dollar is going to somebody. And yes, do they have expenses? Yes, but then I also have expenses. So when I'm hiring out for freelancers, because I have to keep up with my volume, that is not shared by the agency. That is my cost out of my 50%.
Right,
So
right.
it's really, if they're going to travel, if they're going to do this, that's all on them. And you're not picking the hotel, you're not picking which dinners they go to. Like it's kind of
Right.
like, at what point does it end on travel? Like it's just kind of it's interesting. It's more that you feel comfortable with what the arrangement is, and also who's doing what for that financial relationship is kind of a big thing. As far as the idea of an agency being like the thing versus the artist, if you are out looking at product, which I'm sure every single person has told you, if you want to get into this, what you should start is go comp shop. You can literally see the agency puts their name on the back of the product, and it's not the artist. And so that's pretty easy quickly to, if you're out and about looking for who you want to be like or where you want to see your art, you look for things that are similar. And if you're flipping over products and you're constantly seeing an agency, that's good because you'll know which agency it is. But there's literally no manufacturer is asking for that. That's the agency inserting themselves in that process. And so, that kind of speaks volumes about how most things are handled in terms of how important artists are versus agency name. I actually love that my agent has been around for a million years, because everyone will be like, "Oh yeah, I know her," and it's not a woman. It's not even a real name. So it's like, it's almost like a clear cut. Like, yeah, you know that? No, you don't. Okay, cool.
You don't know her.
And that's the thing. They are so, like, their website looks like they're not even a functioning agency. They do not have a good online presence. They have almost no social media. They may have some, I don't know what it is. It's bad if it is. It's like, that's not what they are here for.
Right.
And so on one level, you can be like, what a messy agency. And on another level, I'm like, that's not where their time's going. And so it doesn't really bother me. But it's interesting to look at how agencies are branding themselves like as a brand, the same way artists do. And so, if you are supporting their brand, which we all are, like that goes back to your client base, but a branded agency is kind of also a new development that we haven't really seen prior. It's like a whole new
I know.
stage
There's so
presence
many.
that just wasn't there before.
And when we started talking and Michael was saying his previous experience was more like a studio, like then there's studios. I've heard people talk about, like, ask me about like art brokers. And I'm like, what's the difference between an art broker and a studio versus an art broker and an agent versus, like, there's just so many nuances. And I do feel bad for people who are new to this industry, because it's like, it feels like there's so much to, when four people who have been doing this for ages, and our collective experience is decades upon decades, and we're still like unsure or hear about new things. Like when Nadia was signing with Liz Wayne and she was like, have you ever heard of an onboarding fee? And I was like, nope, never heard of that one, but okay, it's like there's always something, right? Like,
but then
so,
weirdly, like, they make sense, right? Like now that like we know the agents too, I totally get an onboarding fee.
yeah,
There are
and
so
exactly.
many
I was like,
hours that
ask
goes into
follow up.
that.
Nadia knew to ask follow up questions. We're not suckers, but like
Right.
But the
So if you
point
feel
is,
good,
people-
right? It makes sense. It feels good. If the onboarding fee was $5,000, you may not feel so good. If you're just like,
Right.
hey, if I have to pay someone $20 an hour to onboard you, I mean, the portfolios alone are, our agency only takes on one artist, maybe two every 1 to 2 years, because no one has time to do that. I mean, it
Right.
has to be it's a huge commitment from the agent. So if they're in talks with you, they're not just trying to like get you. So again, onboarding, again, definitely a new thing,
Sure.
but also totally makes sense to me. A show fee makes sense to me if you're not paying 50% of what you make. It's
Right.
all of these things, as long as you're having the conversations and
Yeah.
asking and saying, yeah, that makes sense to me and I can do that. And you feel good about the arrangement. Never talking to an agent and being charged $2,000 a year, maybe you don't feel good about that.
Right.
If you're like it's just, what do you
Right.
feel comfortable with? And I think
100%.
the transparency that you have with your agent is that's the hard part, right? Because it is a leap of faith that you take, and most people don't even know if it's working for 3 years. Like that's a heck of
Right.
that's like a holy crap. Like
We're
we're
signing on
locking
to-
arms and doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like if you have people that are both in good faith there to work together, it's like any other relationship you have been involved in. So, if good faith is that everyone's showing up and trying to do the work, and we're going to split that like highs and lows. And then there's other people that are like, definitely more, you can serve what my needs are, and I will kind of be available. And I don't know, I feel like most times, like as you're looking and talking to people, that's the read that you're looking for, is what feels like a fit for you, and does the conversation flow, and those kind of things. I know for me that was definitely a part of knowing, from like an exploratory conversation to being like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this. Still leap of faith, but it was like, I feel good about this person, and I like the way that their manufacturing partners talk about them, and I like the way that the other artists talk about them. And that's kind of the bigger, I mean, you don't know, but I
Yeah.
think it was a better
You have to
start.
take a bit of a leap
Overseas,
of
or
faith
people
for
like,
sure.
yeah, do you feel good about it? Is kind of just a
Yeah.
general gut question.
Yeah.
There also seems to be like I've talked to Nicole about this before. Like we're in therapy together sometimes.
With each
And,
other.
yeah, with each other. And that's our side job. We also are psychotherapists.
Art therapists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this sort of relates to what I was saying before about like a branded artist versus, a different type of artist. And I'm just reaching 3 years here, and that's like the magic number, right? People will say it takes like 3 to 5 years to get blah blah blah. And the first year was very lean, and to be fair, I've talked openly about this. I'm not making like bank. I couldn't live off of my licensing. It's an added extra, and I don't mind doing it, but it's certainly not going to be like a full-time replacement for me. But it's at the 3 year mark. I am seeing a little bit more momentum of things building. I get more emails and more inquiries, and do you want to do this, and things like that. I will say that I do think that if you join an agent and you think like, you are the bee's knees, my art is so cool, it is so current, and I just will need to just make, and everyone will love me and come to me, and that'll just be it. I don't know that I think that that's really how things work anymore. Like maybe there's a few people, and we could all point to them on Instagram and go, wow, like it's lightning in a bottle and they managed to do this. And I think that's like like if you swapped art licensing for, let's say, music, you would not assume that everybody who thinks they're the next Taylor Swift is going to be the next Taylor Swift. Like it's a 1 in a million chance that you're going to be picked up by a record label. And like, even if you are picked up, that they aren't going to change your style or tweak your look or, make you into this marketable thing. So I find that like, being on both sides of the aisle, like an art director and a making artist, that like, there's a level of, if you are easy to work with, if you are willing and you are adaptable, I almost feel like your style is not super relevant. It is, but it's not like the end all be all. Like, sure, you should have your look and you should have your wheelhouse and you should whatever, but like there's something to be said about artists who deliver on time, who work really hard, who you can rely and like almost pre-predict what they'll hand back when you ask for it, so there's not going to be a lot of like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's sort of like where I've just gotten to, where I think like my agent knows what I'm capable of. I know what they're capable of. And I know this seems sort of like out of hat, but like it relates to what Nicole was saying, in that like you're picking someone that you're going to be giving money to. You're picking someone that you're building a business with. You're picking like a relationship that's supposed to benefit both of you. And I think some of that you need to really show them who you are. It's not, at that point, it's not even about your art. It's about like, what's your background? What do you know? Can you interpret? Can you figure it out? Like, you know, and that really comes down to a lot of the product investigations or whatever. Like there's so many artists that like they don't walk stores, they don't flip the things over, they don't look at the materials, they don't know what the difference between a decal and a this and a that, you know, they don't know any of the production processes. And I think like the more you are able to insert yourself, say, in as a cog in this process, the better, the more likely it is you will get repeat business, even if your art isn't like that person that you see on Instagram that you just wish you were. Like some of that social media stuff, I think, is our downfall. You know, we all compare ourselves and we all think like, oh, if I only had done this, I'd be more successful. If only I was more modern, I'd be more successful. If only I was like with a bigger agent, I'd be more successful. And, you know, even just sitting here with the four of you, it's like, all these little things. I'm like, oh my God, if I had to pay 5,000 or 1,500 or whatever to an agent, like I would have bailed out immediately, because like, how do you do that? But you know,
I didn't make much money.
right. And but then everyone has their different experiences where like it benefited you in the long run. You were there for 10 plus years, you know. It's just, it's also different. You know, you've touched on that many times. Like there's no one way that this happens. And it's from the talent level, like, are you a painter? Are you a designer? Are you digital? Are you analog? Did you pay? Do you not pay? Do you get 50? Do you get 40? Like trying to find, like, I just remember when I was looking, like I hit you up, I hit other people up, and it's like, there was no real commonality to like how you achieve success. It's all independently forged, you know, and it's this weird puzzle piece of part that, you know, hopefully.
Persistence.
Yeah.
I feel like the one key is persistence, right? Like not the key one, the like factor that is everyone who has done it is persistent as hell.
And I think you also have
Michael, you said it about the cog in a wheel, and I think what people forget, or at least like, I don't think it's really like emphasized, is that how licensing can serve the artist. And it is actually a whole system that is happening without us. Like, is the from retailer purchasing to buyers to, yes, the agents. And that, so like, yeah, the cogs in the wheel that you are basically your buffet of skills. So like lettering was not something I did when I first came in, but I figured out I could do it. So it's another cog that gets potted. So what happens is when you start to like, can you do product development? That'll be up here. Can you do lettering? That'll be down here. Can you do layout? That's up here. Traditional painting is this, whimsical, like children's, like you, all these little things that you are. And it's really about like, how many things do you have that could fit the slot of what the need is? It has nothing to do with your style. It has nothing to do with you as a brand. And like, does that actually happen? Of course it does happen. And I will say one of the shifts I have been having to make is that I was the hole filler. I used to like say that as a joke, or the supporting artist. Like I used to not say music, I'm like acting. Yeah, like there's movie stars and then there's people that can act in the commercial that you see like on late night. Like it doesn't, there's a lot of different ways to be a working creative in the world, from movie star all the way down to like the guy that does the lights. So, you know, you kind of have to look at it that way too. And so as an artist, when you're coming to the table, you're coming with everything that you've learned from most of us from a different industry before we started to do this. And so your relationship with your agent is there, just like Michael said, understanding of what things you do well versus what things you don't. And I've literally had my agent be just like, yeah, we'll give that to someone else. You'll do a crap job. She's right. Because it's probably like a traditional snowman that will be like terrible, or a Santa Claus. I can't draw people like at all. So it's people, we're not talking about it because it's like, it doesn't make sense. So every time you can be someone that does the, yes, I'm going to try, and you're professional and on time. So yes, sometimes you get the Hail Mary request because nobody knows who can fit that puzzle piece. And then it becomes a new part of your like the whole system. But if a manufacturer is going to your agency, that's why we all have repeat clients, is that the manufacturer is actually relying on the agency where they don't have to worry about how the sausage is made. They're just like, can you handle this for me? That's the system we're fitting into. And then within your own agency, can you handle this for me is a big thing. So, you know, whether you have like the best palette and the most trendy this, for some artists being a brand, and I think it's important to say that's not off the table. I just don't think it's I don't think it's the space on the table that artists come into it thinking it is. And I
Right.
think that that's just such a like shock to people. And I've said this with really good friends that I do believe are art brands. I really do think they view themselves as art brands. Their work looks like an art brand. And I'll kind of like just like gently be like, I just don't think this is the world. Like it doesn't mean that you're not gonna license, but you're not gonna license like me. And you're not gonna license with like the majority of what the main meat, like the main part of it is. And so yes, it can happen. And yes, if that's your vision for yourself, great. But when you take an agent in all of this mix, unless you're a movie star artist, like or the top chart musician artist, right?
Right.
The agency is not going to be able to spend their time with you if you are not also able to serve that agent. And so, yes, we have the lightning the bottle moments of the artists that are known for their style and usually a very large social media presence or whatever it might be. And you may do a couple deals, and that's great. But that has a lifespan built into it. And I know for me
Yeah.
coming in, I was like, I plan to be a full-time licensed artist, not an artist that licensed. I used to always say that. And so that's how I've treated my career. There's lots of licensing opportunities, but are you building a career with it? Is it one of your income streams? Is it like, where does that fall in your mix? Is a conversation you kind of need to have with yourself before you ever go out looking for an agent. Because if you're getting a job, that's what you're doing. You're getting a job and you're working into someone else's system. And when you leave that system, that will continue to work without you. So it's like, you know, you just have to hone your skills. And like I love that like idea of the cog, because you're really just looking for the right part to kind of fit for that project. And sometimes that's product development all the way through whatever, and sometimes it's your name and it's like media and blah blah blah, and sometimes it's I just need a flag with like a bunny eating a chocolate or something. I mean, it's like something really silly. But
I love that. Well, I think that we are out of time, even though we could definitely talk for another hour about this stuff. I think you guys, you know, address some of this, but I would like, I don't know if we can kind of do it like almost a little rapid fire, like a brief sentence or two about what do you think? I mean, maybe Michael and Nicole addressed it to some degree, but Nadia, I'd asked you, what do you think one thing new designers should know about working with an art licensing agency?
I think Nicole and Michael have covered it a little bit, and Elizabeth, you've covered this many times. It's not a magic bullet. And I think that's just important to know, not to discourage anyone, but just to set your expectations that it is like a job, Nicole. It absolutely is. So you're gonna put a lot of work in, and for a long time you're not gonna see anything come out of that. So you have to like that's normal and but you have to be prepared for that. I think that can be quite a shock. It was a huge shock for me with my first agency experience. My expectations did not match reality at all. And you know, sometimes though you just have to dive in and learn. But if you have resources like this, you know, like this conversation that we're having and other people you can talk to, it is good, I think, to get more of a reality check than I had the first time so that you aren't left completely confused as to like what's going on and what you've done wrong.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that's a good sort of pin for it. I do have other videos. Nicole has, you know, talks out like has podcast interviews. There's so many resources out there. You know, and you don't need to feel scared that like I just saw a glimpse at how different everything could be. And there's just so many factors. And now I need to figure out all my cogs and like whatever. You don't need to be like totally overwhelmed and scared. As always, at least from my perspective, it's about moving forward and doing your best and you know, learning through doing. But hopefully this gave people you know, a good look at how different agencies can operate. It may give you some ideas of questions to ask if you have an agency who's interested in you, you can ask them some of these things that we've talked about, because maybe now you do have some ideas. I want to thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. I love hanging out with you guys and hearing more about your day-to-day with your agents. I mean, I have talked to you guys all individually, but even, you know, I've definitely learned some things today about how things work with you guys. And I will be putting all of your information in the description. So if people want to see your art and support you on Instagram or wherever, please do that. Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
You.
All right. So you might have watched that chat and you might be thinking that you have some preferences as to what type of agency you would love to sign with. Some things that you would like to have, some things you would not like to have. And that is awesome. But I do want to be really, really clear. It is currently an agent's market. You know, when they talk about buying houses and it's like seller's market versus buyer's market, unfortunately, right now, it's not an artist's market. Agents have the pick of who they want to work with. And so there are some strategic ways to pitch yourself to agents and research what agencies might work best for you. Luckily, I've got it covered for you. I have a free list of over 50 art licensing agencies that you can download today to get started looking into art licensing agencies. And I just debuted a brand new product called Licensing Agent Ready Research Toolkit. And this toolkit is going to help you efficiently look for art licensing agents and take you through the whole process and make it really clear and really easy for you. Definitely check out that free list and that upgrade in the description, as well as the links to look at more from the artists that we talked to today.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more tips, tutorials, and interviews to level up your surface pattern design journey.